Can all join palms? And then repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
Keeping the palms joined. Move the palms down. So, good evening, everybody. Good to see you all here on a Tuesday evening. It's that week where that gratitude word is being thrown around. I think Thanksgiving or something like that's going on this week. So that's what I heard. And as I was doing my offering, there's all the different images and the statues of the Buddhas. They all have different meanings. And there's one where there's actually a monk where his hand is kind of like sitting like this, and his hand is kind of here on the edge of the bowl. And then there's other ones where the Buddha is just holding the bowl. And there are two meanings to those. One is the generosity of giving. At the time of the Buddha, they were homeless, wandering monks, and so they needed to be supported by the lay people. And so there was the generosity of the people that fed the Buddha. And then in return, they gave spiritual support to the Sangha, to the community, the guidance and things like that. And so often what I'd always heard was that practice is around the generosity practice, and that image is the generosity practice, but it also represents gratitude for receiving. And so if you think about, people that supported the Buddha without the gratitude for having received, it would have been a really kind of unhealthy dynamic. And so, as this, I always, and those of you who know me, to me, it's all about being grateful every single day. But it also becomes this thing that we just like say, oh, be grateful, I'm grateful. But what does that really mean? And then you have these weeks where everybody's just throwing gratitude at you. And I think it's a great opportunity to kind of ponder a little bit, what we are actually grateful for, in our lives. And very specifically, all the people that have given so much to us throughout our lives. Some of them are people we know and love, and some of them are people that we maybe don't see anymore, and some of them are people that drive us absolutely crazy, and everywhere in between. But there's so many people that have given us so much in our lives that regardless of our dynamic or relationship with them, the gratitude, hopefully runs pretty deep. And I think to stop and reflect on that, times like this, hopefully every day, but times like this is really important to just really be aware of all the people that have helped us and supported us along the way, and to have gratitude for them, because without them, none of us would be here. So with that, we'll start with the meditation practice. A couple things to tell you before we begin, especially if you're new. Nothing's going to happen to you. You're not going to float away. You won't have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. All right, don't judge your practice, meaning don't ask yourself, is this working? Is it not working? Am I doing it right? Am I doing it wrong? We're just going to sit, we're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds like that. Maybe somebody will cough, maybe a phone will ring. This is life. Life is filled with chaos, and the practice of meditation is learning to get quiet and still within all the chaos. Most important, don't expect anything. All right, if you sit there waiting for some grand aha moments or deep realizations, you'll probably be pretty disappointed. So we're just going to sit and breathe. Posture, if you're on the cushions, often it helps if you slide to the front third, pushing the stomach forward. Allows the back to straighten, shoulders are relaxed, hands on the knees or in the lap. Same thing if you're in the chairs, relaxing the shoulders, sitting up straight. You want to relax, but also be aware of posture and try not to slouch or get lazy. That'll end up just putting you to sleep. I'll say things periodically to wake you up because you have fallen asleep, or remind you that you're lost in thought and bring you back to the present moment. I'll guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. And starting with the eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth open or closed. Start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Gently guide the attention, focus to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. Breathing in, follow breath in. Breathing out, follow breath out. letting go of expectations, letting go of judgments from the practice. Just sitting, breathing. Where's your mind? Lost in thought? Return attention, focus to the breath. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle, know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. And no one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. And once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And as you slowly open the eyes, slowly begin to move. Most important with the practice of meditation is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, it's quiet, calm, still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how we sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being no different than anyone in this room, and began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. What that means very simply for all of us in this room, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in or where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens, more reactions. That's what we get every day. This practice is learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way we responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how we respond to everything else that's happening throughout our days. So all we're working on is closing the gap to the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, and focused, distracted by nothing, and disturbed by no one. This practice is not easy. It's not necessarily fun. Meditation is not an escape as often people think it is. It is direct perception into the present moment. Sometimes that present moment is painful, uncomfortable. Sometimes the present moment is pleasant. Sometimes the present moment is neutral. But learning to be with things as they are is the essence of this practice. Once we stop trying to change, fix, control, manipulate so many things around us, and we work on changing our minds and our reaction to the world around us, life gets simpler. But it is a practice. I like to look at it as a lifelong practice. It doesn't always get easier. As I always say, it doesn't fix things. Especially if you're new to Buddhism, it's not the thing that's going to make everything perfect in your life. It's going to make you become aware of everything that's actually in your life and how we deal with it, how we respond to it, how we speak and how we think and what we do. It's really just waking up to the present moment and being with it as it is. And then kind of tying back to what I started talking about at the beginning, if we can then just have gratitude for each moment as it arises, it tends to make the present moments a little more pleasant, even in the unpleasant moments. No matter how unpleasant a moment is, in most cases, it could always be more unpleasant. Sounds fun, right? This moment sucks, but it could always suck more. You know? So I've learned that through this path, is that some moments in your life, many moments in your life, I mean, that's the first thing the Buddha taught. Life is filled with dukkha, suffering, discomfort, angst. There's going to be many difficulties in our lives. But no matter what difficulty we face, and no matter how challenging it is, it could always be more so. So sometimes we stop and say, wow, I'm grateful that this really unpleasant moment isn't more unpleasant than it is. It sounds really silly, but something I started doing years ago, especially for an angry, depressed kid that wanted to be like, perfectly happy all the time and could never even be remotely happy. Putting this practice in my life and learning to find gratitude in the unpleasant moments was really wonderful. But like I said, it is a practice, and our mind often wants to default to critiques and judgments and blames and how wrong things are. It becomes difficult. So I don't really have too much I want to say more than that right now. So I always prefer to just open up to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything that's on your mind that I can address, and we can go from there. Yes, sir.
You mentioned the words dependent origination.
Yes.
I have no idea what that means.
Neither do I. Dependent origination is, I always say, pratitya samupata, which is dependent origination, and this is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. So, first off, for those who don't know, the word Buddha just means awakened. He was just a dude, just a human, just like all of us. And the heart of his awakening was based in dependent origination, understanding the causal relationship of all phenomena. Everything is contingent upon something else for its existence. Everything. Nothing can exist independently from everything. Now, just because it popped into my head, I'll say this. There's this kind of very modern, and I don't mean this in an offensive way, but a very kind of modern New Age thing that's where I often will hear people say around spiritual circles, it says we're all one. My approach and my view of Buddhism is a little bit different. It's actually a lot different. Like, we're not all one. We're all very different. Different physical form, right? Different names. I mean, sometimes I guess we have the same name, but different experiences, different views, different perceptions. So we're all very different. We're not all one, but we are all interconnected in some way. No matter where we go, we are contingent upon something else for its existence, right? So do you realize that if it were not for Emanuel Swedenborg, did you ever meet him? No? Really? He lived in the mid-1700s. Right? Could be why. He could have been there a couple hundred years ago. I don't know. Right? But if it were not for him, the Swedenborg following would never have existed. If it were not for the Swedenborgian congregation, they never would have built this church. If it were not for them, you wouldn't have a pew right there that you're sitting on. So really, you can thank Emanuel Swedenborg for the fact that your butt's not on the floor right now. Because of him, there's a pew right there for you to sit on. Now, I'm pretty certain that in a million years, you never would have had that thought unless I explained it that way. And that was just the most random example I could come up with at this moment. And so in that regard, right, your existence on that pew, in that seat, is because of somebody who lived over 200 years ago. You're not him, he's not you. But this condition is dependent upon that condition. It is a causal relationship of his birth. You should actually thank his mother. Because of his mother, you have a pew to sit on right now. Now, take that one silly example and apply that to everything else in your life. Right? The shirt you're wearing, the socks you're wearing, right? The food we eat, the places we go. Everything is contingent upon something else for its existence. But what we typically do is we just use, and I don't mean in a bad way, but we use or we function with what's in front of us. We operate what's in our immediate world, and we don't often see how they're connected. And I think dependent origination really helps. Again, tying back to what I originally started talking about, one of the things that it really brings up, if you look at it, is a sense of gratitude. Because it allows us to really appreciate everyone and everything and every place that existed before us, for us to be here. You know, without mother and father, regardless of what relationships people have or don't have with mothers and fathers, right? Without them, none of us are sitting here right now. You know? So does that help explain it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I like to say the causal relationship, law of cause and effect, which is karma. It's the action. Causal relationship of all phenomena. Everything contingent upon something else for its existence. And being able to see the kind of chain or the string or whatever you want to call it of how they're connected. It's pretty crazy. And I think the important part about that is once you see things that way, right? Often, not putting words in anyone's mouth, but often we tend to think that we are the center of the universe. And that we are most important. My thoughts, my views, my judgments, my perceptions, my labels, everything, that we are correct and we're most important. We tend to operate from that place. It's part of our fun human experience, right? And so I think this also helps us recognize, and I think that's what the Buddha was teaching, really, that when we come out of the view that says we are most important and we recognize that we are all contingent, we all rely on each other for something. Right? We're all contingent upon others for our existence. It hopefully helps us stop being so focused on thinking I, myself, am most important. You know? If none of you were sitting here right now, I'd be talking to myself. You know? So I'm grateful you're all here. So. Other questions?
I noticed the six-tusked white elephant over there,
Yeah.
and I tried to do a little Googling, but didn't get very far.
While we were sitting here?
Beforehand.
Okay. I figured maybe during meditation you were like 6 tusk elephants. Nothing popped up, huh?
Well, there was something, but it didn't make a lot of sense, and I wondered if you...
What came up? I'm just curious.
It said there was some sort of a legend of like the elephant sharing its tusks or something.
Huh, I've never heard that.
Oh.
Different. I was just curious to know what came up. It's funny that you asked specifically about that because often, people ask about the statues and what the representation and meanings, but nobody's ever asked like specifically why 6 tusks. And so the 6 tusks represent what's called the 6 paramitas. The word paramita translates to perfection. And to explain it in a little more depth, in the Mahayana school of Buddhism, which comes predominantly from initially 500-600 years after the Buddha died and the Buddhist teachings went north, China, Japan, Korea, you have the development of Mahayana Buddhism. And within that school, you have what's called the Bodhisattva path. And the Bodhisattva, Bodhi means enlightened, Sattva is being. So it's an enlightened being or someone who vows to live or continue to live or be reborn for the benefit of all sentient beings. Right? So that's the Bodhisattva vow, very technically, to be reborn life after life until all beings are free from suffering. Right? If you're not a fan of life after life stuff, fine, doesn't matter. Think of it in a Western context like an angel, someone who's devoted their life to making sure that all beings suffer less. That's the Bodhisattva vow. Now, that vow doesn't mean that you are an enlightened being. right? You can vow to liberate all beings from suffering and still be an idiot sometimes, right? But the idea is to hold to that vow. And so the vows are really important. And so the Bodhisattva recognizes that there's this world of kind of suffering. They call it samsara, the experience of dukkha, the cycle of rebirth, and there's liberation, nirvana, and freedom from suffering. So the Bodhisattva will go helping people cross the shore to come out of suffering and then go back to continue to help. And the 6 practices the Bodhisattva uses are what's called the 6 paramitas: generosity, morality, patience, diligence, concentration, and wisdom. Generosity, morality, patience, diligence, concentration, and wisdom. And so my first master, that was her entire life, was embodying those practices. And the beautiful thing about the 6 paramitas is you don't have to be Buddhist. It doesn't matter if you're Christian, Catholic, Muslim, Jewish, pagan, or none of the above. Whatever religion you are or whatever you believe in, you can practice generosity. You can give people, attention, a smile, a hug, whatever it might be. Give them an ear to, just listen to them. Morality, right? You can be honest and moral and work on not lying and manipulating and cheating and stealing and things like that. Not saying you do, but right? Patience. Right? We can all be more patient, like that person probably needs a little bit of patience, right? But then at the same time, maybe they're rushing off to the hospital because somebody is ill. So we never know, right? We don't know what's going on there. Maybe they just were testing out the new tires they got. Who knows? We don't know what's going on. But so patience is always a good practice, especially around holiday time. It's funny around the holidays, like over the next 6 weeks, I talk about patience constantly. Because very often it's the family that we know and love the most and that we're always around that often requires the most amount of patience. So patience is important. And then diligence, the effort, whatever it is. If you're working on school, if you're working on work, if you're working on a relationship, if you're working on your relationship to yourself, if you're working on Legos, put the right effort in, concentration. Develop a level of focus and concentration that you can apply to everything you're doing. Try to train the mind to be present, not to let it wander and think about your whole life too often, right? Because all the stuff you're thinking about from the past that you want to change, can you change any of it? No. Too bad, right? I mean, sometimes I wish I could change a lot of things, but you can't. So we concentrate on saying, this is my life now. And then wisdom. I like to look at wisdom as really just the application of the first 5. And then also understanding the opposite of wisdom in Buddhist teachings is ignorance. So just understanding when we are being ignorant, meaning we're attached to our views and thinking we're always correct. So ignorance is ignoring the truth. And the truth is never our perception of something. The truth is never our perception of something. Thich Nhat Hanh would say, nirvana, freedom from views, or freedom from suffering, is freedom from views. It's one of the best teachings I ever heard. I talk about it at least once every 4 weeks. Because when we suffer all day long, and we struggle all day long, and we argue, and we're challenged all day long, whose views are we stuck in? Ours. And whose views do we think are right? Ours. I mean, did you walk around all day telling everybody, my views are wrong, man? No, we think our views are correct. And it doesn't mean you have to abandon them or, think you're wrong. But if you can begin to understand that every other person in this room, they got their own views. So the wisdom is to understand everybody lives this world with their own views. So that's the practice, and that's what's represented by the six tusks. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much.
Yeah, for sure. We should put that on Google. Did you write all that down? Yeah.
While we're on numbers,
Yes.
is there a significance to the 3?
The 3 bells.
Yeah, the 3 bells.
There is actually. First to keep in mind that every Buddhist tradition, I come from a Taiwanese Buddhist background, again, a Mahayana kind of Chan, which is Zen or Pure Land practice. So every Buddhist tradition, if you're in Thailand, a Thai temple, or in Thailand, if you're, Nepalese or Tibetan practice, they all have different rituals, different bells and whistles and sounds and gongs and all kinds of fun stuff. But the teaching that I got on the 3 is that when you hit the bell 3 times, it represents the triple gem, which is the first one is the Buddha, to take refuge in the Buddha, not in the man himself because he died and he really can't help you much right now, but the Buddha nature, which says that just like the Buddha awakened and figured out how to end his suffering, we too can awaken. So that's the first one. The second one is the Dharma, and that's the teachings. And then the third one is the Sangha, which is the community. So the word refuge is important. If you look at refuge, kind of safety, comfort, protection, whatever the word refuge means to you. And then as a practitioner, and that's what when I do the offering and I join palms, I always say, take refuge in what's the triple gem, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. And so the 3 bells represent the triple gem. Yeah. But if you go to another Buddhist temple and they hit it 5 times, it's like, don't tell them they're wrong, Just tell them I'm wrong. It's easier that way. So, yeah, the 3 bells. Lots of numbers in Buddhism, which is interesting. I don't know, the triple gem, 4 noble truths, 5 precepts, 6 paramitas, lots of numbers.
You gave a range one time that's something like 140 to 200.
Oh, the precepts?
Yeah.
Yeah, the precepts is
Yeah.
227 to 311 precepts. Which ironically enough, wasn't there an old TV show like 227 or something like that? Anyone remember that?
222 or 222.
No, a different one. I don't know that one.
It's a room.
You're huh? It was a room 222? Yeah, I don't remember that one. I think there was an old show called 227. Can you Google that? See what comes up when you put in 227 in a TV show. You can get back to me on that. We still got a few minutes. Yeah. But that's how I always remembered that number, was because of the old TV show. Yeah. Yeah. What else? Thoughts, questions? Meditation, Buddhist practice.
Who's the statue in front of the gold one?
The starving one?
Yeah.
The one that looks really hungry?
Yeah.
That's the Buddha, before he became the Buddha. So that's what's called the emaciated Buddha. And when the life of the Buddha, the story of him roughly,
A little bit.
he was a real person, right?
Yeah.
He was a prince.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he's a prince living with all the wealth, all the riches, everything you can imagine. And 29 years old, he sneaks out in the middle of the night, and it happened over 4 times, but for story's sake, he saw 4 things: old age, sickness, and death. And he saw an ascetic, kind of a simple monk or nun. And he went back and realized he was living as a prince, and there's a world out there that suffered. So he snuck out, he left, and he became a homeless wandering beggar for 6 years. And during that time, they were living, this is 2,500 years ago, it's 500 years before Christ, and they're living, roaming around the base of the Himalayan mountains. And at that time, it was a Hindu practice, right, Hindu religion. And they thought that if they overcame attachment to the physical body, that's how they would awaken, enter into nirvana or liberation. So it's said that they ate 1 grain of rice a day. They did crazy things like stand on 1 leg at a time. They would hang from trees with 1 arm, and they just tried to really stretch the physical form. And so 1 grain of rice a day, they say that you took your fingers and went front to back, and your fingers would touch. All right, that's how skinny he was. They then came to a river, and there was a woman there with some food, and she offered it to them. And they were like, no, we can't eat. And Siddhartha was his name. He was like, well, I'm hungry. I don't know exactly what he said, but he said something like, I'm hungry. And so he took the bowl of food, and he said, I'm going to put the bowl in the river, and if it goes against the stream, I'm going to eat the food. The bowl went against the stream. This is the story. And he started to eat the food. And he regained his physical health. And these 5 guys he was traveling with left him. They're like, you're sellout, traitor, food eater, I can't believe you would eat. And so he became physically healthy again. And this in Buddhism is what we introduce as what's called the middle path, which is really important, especially for lay people, non-monks, non-nuns, is that we live with so much excess and so much waste. We all have probably 2 to 3 to 5 to 10 times as many shirts as we need. But we still have them, and we still buy more. We have 20 pairs of shoes, 10 pairs of shoes, 5 pairs of shoes. We don't need them all, but we have them. You know, we spend $20, $40, $50 on a meal. We don't need to spend that much, but we do. We get so much food, we throw away half of it. You know, so we live in such a wasteful way of life very often. Now, it doesn't mean get rid of everything. It doesn't mean live with nothing, but it also, and there's no answer to how much one person should have, but to explore in your own personal life, what do I have that I don't maybe need as much of? You know, if I have 20 pairs of shoes, maybe I could live on 10 and give 10 away to people. You know, if I spend $20 on a meal, maybe I could spend 10 and go buy a sandwich for somebody who has nothing to eat. So it introduces the middle path where we find a balance, not just physically, but also mentally, emotionally, spiritually. How much in our lives are we pushing ourselves in a way that's really unhealthy? And we like burn ourselves out this way, and then we crash over here. And then we, you know, it's the typical Monday through Friday, I'm going to hate my life. And then I'm going to have so much fun Saturday and Sunday just to make up for the 5 days that I hated.
Yeah.
You know, there's just no balance. So this represents finding a balance in your life, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. So he went on, obviously regained his physical health. And when we picked that Buddha, when we opened the temple 13 years ago, we picked that Buddha because it represented us, where we were physically, mentally, you know, spiritually, emotionally near death as young people. And instead of sitting with this fully enlightened Buddha, we wanted to sit with something that we could connect with. You know, I don't know what it's like to be an awakened being, but I know what it's like to starve myself to death in all the ways I just mentioned.
Yeah.
So that was more real to us. And so to me, this day, every single day, when I do my offering and I bow and I look at that, I just am reminded to continue to work on a middle path, continue to work on a balance, continue to work on being less extreme with things. And again, it's important to understand that it's not like the Buddha said, this is the way. I mean, he did, but not with what I'm talking about, right? There's no, like, for each of us, that middle path, each of us in this room is different. We all have a different middle path. And so I think important around this teaching is to explore what is your middle way? What is your middle path? Where could you live in a more balanced life? Yeah,
Cool.
Yeah, for sure. What else? We got a few more minutes before we wrap up.
This is not a question, but I noticed today that when you were speaking the part about people that are gonna cough, people sneeze, this is life. Life is in the chaos. We have to learn how to get quiet and still within that chaos. And I realized how much that line stands out to me. And I feel like that is something probably the most powerful lesson I've carried through this practice, because I find myself like, if you're in a movie or, you know, some place where everyone is supposed to be quiet, or like it's kind of embarrassing if someone's like phone goes off or talk or something, you know, that is completely gone. Like I don't scorn the person who throws her on her phone. And it's just funny to watch people's reaction when like the giggle or something.
Yeah.
I mean, it's something that I didn't really notice until recently, that it just doesn't bother me.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, it's for those who maybe didn't hear, just to kind of paraphrase or repeat that back, it's just the idea that when I always talk about in the meditation, I always say, you know, you'll hear sounds. It's learning to be quiet and comfortable within the chaos. And so what you're really talking about is now seeing how that plays out in your life. And it's funny because I often say that, you know, you don't get, again, especially for those who might be new, you don't get necessarily better at meditation, right? And you don't necessarily see progress from meditation or trying Buddhist teachings here. You see it out there, and it usually just happens. Like one day you're like, oh my God, all of a sudden you're sitting in a movie and somebody's phone keeps going off or they're texting, and you're just not as pissed off as you normally would be.
Yeah.
and you're like, man, this stuff actually works.
Well, I actually think of like that in line that you said.
Yeah.
It's like.
It's life. And the sooner that we can realize that for everybody, like in everything we're doing, because a lot of this has to do with, you know, if I think for me, someone I liked to control growing up everything and try to completely control the surroundings. And that causes a lot of internal struggle.
Yeah.
And once we surrender to that and say, like, I ain't got control of anything or anyone, then we just embrace what's happening around us, and it makes life a lot easier.
Yeah.
You know?
It's funny because it's it's a simple
Simple.
idea.
Yeah.
It's not something that stands out
Yeah.
in addition to everything else you're saying,
Mhm.
but
Yeah. That's funny.
yeah, just something.
Yeah.
just recently.
It's interesting, and I'm not even sure why I'm sharing this, but I'm gonna share it anyways because it's funny to me, and I can't believe I even did it. I went, and I don't usually do these things, but it was a really interesting reaction. I was in line yesterday at the post office. Great time to go to the post office. You know, practice. In fact, Chaz, some of you know Chaz, he texted me yesterday. He's like, you really want to practice? He works at Costco. He's like, you really want to practice patience? Be at Costco the week of Thanksgiving, you know? And so I was in line at the postal place right here, and the line is like, dude, it's out the door, you know? And I had even gone, and then I had a couple things to do, so I left to come back, thinking, well, maybe it'll be shorter. And like my karma is hysterical because it was like twice as long when I went back to the line. But I was like, all right, I got to get in the sign because the thing's got to get shipped out today. And so I'm standing in line, and this woman comes in behind me. And, you know, the small talk and those little social settings where you're trying to maybe connect. Because, you know, it's like being in an elevator or you're stuck in line with this person for 20 minutes. So people want to make small talk sometimes. And all of a sudden, she starts kind of talking to me, and she's just like complaining. And I normally don't say anything. And I turned around to her and I said, you know, you really don't have to complain. But I said it in a nice, like, I didn't like, I promise, I wasn't like a total, you know, what to her. I just turned around and I was like, you know, you don't have to complain. And I mean, it doesn't even matter what she was complaining about, but it was completely, you know, there were 3 people working and there were 2 empty counters. And she was complaining about the fact that why don't they have 5 people working? And in my mind, I'm thinking like, why is completely irrelevant right now. They have 3 people working, and all the complaining in the world doesn't fix it. I didn't say this to her, but this is what's going on in my head. So I turned and I said, you know, you really don't have to complain about this. And then I said something like, this could be a much more positive experience. And then, no, wait. Yeah, I did. And then it was really fascinating that she then completely switched her approach and then started talking about like how nice it was for them to be working. And I don't even know what she then went into, but her whole demeanor changed. And I really do usually never say anything like this, but I just, for some reason, I felt like saying it. And just her outlook completely shifted. I don't know what she said about me when she left, you know, or when I left, but it was a really fascinating experience. And then, you know, then it was just a pleasant 20 minutes in line. So I don't know. I don't know if there's any point in that. I just felt like sharing it. Yeah, I'm grateful for the 3 people who are working that have to deal with all the customers that are all upset because they're in line. You know, I'm grateful for the people that are working at the grocery stores and Costco's this time of year and all the, you know, Targets and Walmarts and all these other maddening, crazy places. Because they're just trying to get through their days like us, you know. So often those people get stomped on a lot. So cheers to the postal workers, yeah.
You know, I was just going to share something that I started doing a few years ago. And I belong to the mastermind group, and the leader of the mastermind group travels like 24/7. He's always in the air. And he brings a bag of M&Ms or some chocolate and gives it to the leads of here, you guys share it. And a lot of us do that when we go somewhere. And it's always interesting to see the reaction because you ask for the lead
Right.
the first thing that happens is they think, oh no, something bad, it's the what's going on. And then you give it to them, you say, we just appreciate that you're here today, or we appreciate you, what you do.
Yeah.
And it completely changes that person. And it's like you just see a shift, and it's just the smallest little thing.
Absolutely.
It's pretty cool.
It's a good practice, I think, for us to do, especially around these times of year when we're in such a rush, to really stop and thank and appreciate and have gratitude for all those people that are doing whatever they're doing. And we know what it feels like when people appreciate us. And so if we, again, coming back to generosity, you can give people the knowledge or feeling of being appreciated. That's a really beautiful thing. So thanks. All right, so we'll close on that. We'll join palms. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to Luna during her time of rebirth and to Marisa during her time of suffering. May all be at peace and all be free from suffering. So thanks all for being here. Couple quick announcements. My name is Jeff. I'm a Dharma bum. We opened up 13 years ago downtown to introduce Buddhist practice to local folks. Those of us who lead, we're not monks, we're not nuns, we're not gurus, we're not masters, we're not teachers, we're not looking for students. We're just practitioners. So we do our best to take our understanding of Buddhist teachings and put it into terms that hopefully make sense to those who show up. Every night we have different practices going on, different people leading from a different Buddhist tradition. First Saturday of the month, we do a half day of silence. So if 20 minutes of silence isn't enough torture for you, you can do it for 4 hours. It's phenomenal. You get to be with yourself for 4 hours. It's not that bad, I promise. A couple things out of the ordinary for Thanksgiving. In general, holidays, we don't change. Nothing closes. Holidays are often wonderful times, and for many people, they're extremely difficult, challenging, sad, lonely, depressing times as well. So our schedule doesn't matter what holiday it is, it doesn't change. The only difference on Thanksgiving, we do feed the homeless every Thursday, 5 o'clock. We'll be doing it at 10 a.m. and not 5 p.m. So we usually have 20, 25 people. I always say one of the best things around is we prepare gourmet vegetarian meals from food that would have been wasted and thrown away. And we feed people sleep on the street every night. So anytime you kind of lack gratitude, feed people or put their head on a sidewalk. It tends to put things into perspective. But for Thanksgiving, we do it at 10 a.m. because a lot of people have stuff often later in the day. So last year, I think there was like 100 people here on Thanksgiving morning. It was really cool. If you are coming to that, don't bring anything else. We have all the food and stuff taken care of. The only thing we're telling people to bring, if you want to bring something, is bring socks. It's often the most overlooked thing when giving out stuff to homeless. They get lots of shirts and blankets and jackets and beanies and warm stuff. A lot of people have used those laying around. A lot of people don't give away used socks. They end up getting thrown away. So homeless end up not getting socks that often. So if you feel you want to buy something and pass it out when we go on Thursday, you can buy some socks. New Year's, we'll have our 13th annual Dharma Bum Temple New Year's celebration. 7 o'clock, we'll do a potluck. 9 o'clock, I do history of Dharma Bum Temple. And then about 11:30, 11:40, we pile in here and we do a 20-minute silent meditation going into midnight. Some people come early and go home. Some people come late, and some people are here all night. But if you've never done a silent and sober New Year's, you get them both on the way here. And I promise it will not ruin your year, and you will survive if you go into the new year silent and sober, which is different from how most of us have probably gone into it in the past. So thanks all for being here. If I never see you again, think good thoughts, speak good words, do good deeds. That's the heart of the practice. So thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Shut this thing off real quick.
He's got to start it.